After all the presentations are over, we will have just about 20 minutes, 25 minutes for discussions. Unless you want to change the order and discuss each paper separately, probably it will save us time. We will be able to manage it better. Therefore, without taking the lesson from V.K. Ramachandran, without explaining what the paper or the themes are about, let me invite each presenter to make the presentation right now. We start with Mr. Vijayaraghavan and Vikram Singh. Okay.
Yesterday onwards, we are handling with multifaceted issues related to the changes which have been taken place in Indian agriculture and its ramification on different sections of the agrarian society. And now I am handling with some of the issues related to the agriculture workers and other sections among the rural proletariat. In this paper, we are trying to analyze different aspects related to the agriculture workers mainly. Here in India, we are all aware that the post-independent India, more attention have been given to implement an agrarian policy which is helpful for the upper strata of the agrarian sector to be consolidated more and more, and the lower strata is in the receiving end. So the main defect is known to everyone that no radical changes have been taken place on land related issues. No land reforms have been taken place of course there are land reforms, but most of them are in nominal, except in Kerala, no radical land reforms have been taken place. So naturally, these changes which have been taken place did not help the lower strata. Nominal land reforms have been taken place. So that helped the landlords to preserve their land, and due to the implementation of capitalist agriculture, one section developed as capital agriculture is, as well as a new section who are using the new technology, etc., rich peasantry in our country, then the middle marginal peasants and agricultural laborers. So now, an important phenomena is that the different papers submitted in different sessions have also projected that aspect, in which there's a qualitative change in the rural area among the agrarian section. Two aspects. One is the agrarian crisis. I do not want to go to the details about the agrarian crisis and its different ramifications. Everyone knows about that. Now the new economic policy and the price related fluctuations and the government's withdrawal from the infrastructure support and the fluctuations of price related to the international situation and different FTAs and its impact. So everything reflects in the agrarian scenario, which is beneficial only for the upper strata. So naturally, this marginalization of the marginal farmers is the important issue which have been taken place in last 30 years, I think. Because of marginalization, two changes have been taken place. Number one, on the first part, the number of agriculture workers have been increased. That is a process started in our India almost last 20-30 years. Therefore, these agriculture workers outnumbered the peasantry in our country. They are the largest section in the rural India, in the agriculture as such. They are the largest section. Then this globalization and its impact, agrarian crisis, continuous problems, distress, and so on. Then there is a total change in the Indian rural villages, large-scale migration. And agriculture is insufficient to provide work for the agriculture laborers. Their working days have been reduced like anything. So naturally, they are forced to engage in other activities, other manual laborers, not in a single manual labor. Multiple manual labor became the phenomena in the rural areas. So the real fact is they are engaging in agriculture for certain days, but their main source of income becoming other than agriculture worker, they are engaging in so many other works. Now that section is outnumbering even the agriculture laborers. That is the change. That is the important change which has been taken place in agriculture in India. So earlier these farmers, middle farmer, marginal farmer, they are the main section. Then the agriculture workers became the more in number. Then this manual labor, they are the majority among the agriculture laborers. A new phenomena which is emerged in India. That is the biggest problem and biggest, I think that is the important agrarian issue pertaining to this country nowadays. How to handle their problems. They are the people, they are the majority. And they are the most downtrodden. And you see, then if you go through the other details, the government policies are not helping to improve their living conditions. They are the most deprived section in Indian society. Another aspect is there. Majority of them are from the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. So, this caste discrimination, then exploitation, and their backwardness, and their deprived consciousness, everything is aggravating in this period. No institutional assistances are provided by the neoliberal economic agenda in order to enhance the quality of their life. So the government's withdrawal from each and every positive aspects. With regard to land, that is the important issue. Government failed to resolve the land question. Landlessness is increasing, and nearly about 50% of them are landless. And another important aspect, landless and homeless. They are the biggest number in the rural India. Their issues. This issue of landless and homeless people is unaddressing in Indian situation, especially during the period of globalization. And these institutional assistances for improved education, healthcare, housing, social security, everything, the government is backtracking. No proper allotment. So it further aggravated the situation. Reversal of land reforms, land pooling, and non-distribution of the surplus land. Nowadays, no serious discussion on these land-related issues. Changing the existing land relations and patterns. That part is shelved by the ruling class and the ruling class policies. So naturally land became a serious issue. No proper program to provide them land for cultivation, surplus land, and not even providing them the house sites and houses by the government. Then an important program was introduced, that is this MNREGA. So what happened? In the implementation, it was a failure in a sense. You see, the working days are coming, the attraction is reducing. Last 2 years, it was reported that in this note also we have mentioning that nearly about 1 lakh workers who are engaging in MNREGA lost their work because of the 1 crore they lost their job. So the approach is quite callous from the side of the central government. They are not enhancing the allotment. Only 25% of the actual needed amount they are providing. So whatever little assistances which was provided by the ruling government, they are also, now they are trying to phase out the scheme and also making it to unattractive. So this is the situation which is prevailing in the rural areas. Then feminization of the agriculture work. You see, the large scale migration is going on, feminization is going on, and for the female agriculture laborers, no social security, any kind of protection, any kind of legal assistances, nothing, zero. All kind of exploitation. That is doubled in this period, I think. Because they are forced to take all the aspects of the family. They are the family heads. Because the migration is that much enhanced all over India. Yes, especially in North Indian state like from Assam to, you see, Assam, Bihar, Orissa, Uttar Pradesh, that area, I think large scale migration of the agriculture workers have been taken place to all across the nation. So it's a very deepened crisis is going on. In this situation, we have to take up their multifaceted issues. The government schemes, other government schemes should be provided to them. In order to provide schemes, there is the need of a comprehensive legislation, no legislation which is favoring these agriculture workers, manual laborers and the rural proletariat. Except in Kerala. Kerala we have this Kerala is a different thing. Of course, Kerala we have the comprehensive legislation in 1974, which was implemented by the left government in 1980. Then a pension scheme was introduced for the agriculture workers, and different schemes are there, and a welfare fund is also there, welfare board is there to protect their day-to-day issues. So, except Kerala, all the other states as well as the central government failed to enact a comprehensive legislation for the agriculture laborers and rural workers. So, that's also an important issue. Earlier, there was some discussion in the parliament about such a legislation. After BJP came to power, they shelved everything on the legislation. So, no legislative support for these agricultural laborers. That's a very difficult, hence there's a very difficult situation for them to safeguard their livelihood. So this is the condition, and the failure of PDS That's also aggravating the situation. So, more or less, there's a deep crisis among their life in this life of the manual labor and agriculture workers, and all the policies which they are pursuing is totally against the interest of this section. So, the situation is aggravating. Then some social aspects which is creating big problem in their advancement. What is the social issue? In politics, there is introduction and strengthening of identity politics, caste politics. That has an adverse impact among the advancing of this rural proletariat. The problem is half of them are from the scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. And these identity politics, caste politics, which is promoted by the ruling class. And what happens to this politics in India? If we go the details of that politics in last 3 decades, we can see it has gone and advancing in different states. In a later stage, some of them became part of the power. Then what happens? That politics have been reduced, their strength has been reduced, and this communal politics used this caste politics and identity politics in their favor. I do not want to go to the other ramification of that politics. But one factor has been taken place, that it divided the rural proletariat. It has a negative impact in their strengthening of their organizational strength, of collective bargaining. This helped the ruling class to pursue their policies. So, this change, this social change also have an impact in the progress of the movements. Never address this basic problem. Who are the majority? What is their issue? What is happening? What is the ramification of this neoliberal economic agenda on the majority? And what are the changes which have been taken place? This is a vital issue which is to be addressed. Otherwise, there will not be proper organizational approach even. How to organize these rural masses? As such, there are differences, no comprehensive planning. This economic agenda has been implemented for last 30 years or so. But this aspect, the important ramification, the proletariatization, and what happens to the rural proletariat? What is the situation of manual labor? What is the situation of agricultural labor? And all these aspects, social aspect, all these aspects have not been properly reviewed in our country to the extent which we are expecting. So naturally, nowadays, while we are addressing different aspects of the rural workers and the agricultural laborers in our country, we have to discuss all these aspects. At the same time, I think other comrades are also participating in this discussion. One important aspect is the experience of Kerala. I do not want to go to the details, but with an alternate policy, how Kerala is able to address the questions of this section. That is an issue which we have to be properly propagated all over India. Because they are able to use, Kerala have a different experience of the living conditions of the manual laborers and the agricultural laborers. They are able to resolve most of their issues. And proper social security network is there. Now eradication of poverty is there. This poverty is there. So, and Kerala had done a positive work for this section in our society. So naturally, this will help those who are engaging among these rural workers to highlight these issues and to project an alternative policies further struggles. So naturally in this given situation, all these aspects have to be properly discussed, and joint activities of the rural proletariat and their issues have to be highlighted. And I think now organizationally also some discussions have been started to unify all these sections together. Otherwise this doubt was always there. Doubting Thomases were saying so many differences regarding how to discuss their problems. So naturally, unfortunately, we are not able to raise this basic issue up to the expected level, and we are raising so many other issues, and unfortunately, we were not able to address the real problem of the country and the nation. So while we are having a proper understanding and concrete analysis of the situation which is there in our rural India, proper understanding will help us to come with proper conclusions on their issues and to highlight their issues. I hope some discussions related to the agriculture workers and manual laborers will help us to move in that direction. Thank you.
It's a privilege to have been here listening to you. And as an aside, let me say it's very heartening to note the very senior leadership of the Communist Party of India Marxist being there in the hall, listening, taking part in the discussions. And I consider it really a sign of hope that we should be in a much better position to empower the poorest and the poor in their struggle for sustainable livelihoods. Thank you for drawing attention to the special case of Kerala. I'm not going to rake up the discussion right now. What we will do is, I'm sure we will have an opportunity to go through the various issues you raised, including the special case of Kerala. Let me invite, there is also a change of title for one of the papers, that's by R. Vijay and Nisha Patel. They will speak on tenancy, diversified households, and investment in agriculture, an analysis of National Sample Survey, 77th round of assessment. Next, let me invite Professor Ganesh for his presentation, lecture, or talk on land reforms and socio-economic transformation in Kerala. Thank you.
Dear friends, mine is a presentation which Vijayaraghavan just alluded to, but I am trying to, because it is an oft-repeated area for the number of people who are sitting here, particularly as a vast number of academic literature, including that of Dr. Jose and Professor Ramachandran, who is, both of them are here, is already has been published on this. And also recently we had another publication which has appeared, in which one of the colleagues of Professor Ramachandran was a co-author. So I don't think there is any necessity to go into all the details which they have covered so far, nor am I going into a discussion on what is called the land reforms in Kerala, because again, I think I will be treading over the feet of a large number of scholars who have tread before me. So I'm not going into any of those issues. Instead, I'm trying to sort of focus on some of the major problems that we in Kerala, at least some of us in Kerala, are facing today, and possibly some of the links that some of the lessons that the history of Kerala for the last 70 years or something can provide for us. That is the only thing which I will be concentrating upon. First, to do with the land reforms, I think everyone knows about the land reform process that took place in Kerala between 1958 to 1970. And I am not going into details there. But here I would like to point out only two things here, which I think is both of them are important to me. One is that land reforms which took place between 1958 to 70, the aftermath of it still is going on even now, because even now pattas are being distributed. Even now lands are being actually distributed all over Kerala. So which means that the aftermath of the land reforms is still proceeding. And this process, according to me, again, it's a point that can be debated. According to me, resulted in the what we call elimination or destruction of what we call as landlordism in Kerala. But it's landlordism itself, that is particularly Malabar and in other places, landlordism itself was a creation of the British colonial instruments, where the tax-paying farmer of the British colonial period was actually depicted as a landlord, or the landlord was depicted as the tax-paying farmer. A majority of the tax-paying farmers were from the food crop regions in Kerala, which meant that the entire process of land reform was actually limited to a large extent to the food crop regions in Kerala, where two major places, I'm talking about the extreme coastal region as well as the mountain territory, that is hill region, was not a part of the land reform process. This is the first thing which I am trying to mention. The hill region was actually, it was already been transformed into plantation economy, and which is probably the first instance of agrarian capitalism in Kerala. If one wants to call it as capitalist, that is plantation economy, it could be called as an industry also. Some people call it as an industry. So which means that you have got a situation where capitalism was developing along with this thing. And along with that, in the coastal region, the coconut growing gardens, which was substantial, particularly in parts of Kerala, like for example the areas around Alappuzha, for example, and similar regions were the substantially large number of coconut planting areas, which were in fact were paying something called Patakkanam at that time. And the Patakkanam was a kind of annual rent that was being given. And this annual rent process, which was actually different from the normal rent that was being paid from the food crop regions, was in fact most of it was paid, and that kind of thing was different from that of the food crop rent kind of regime. And which also meant that the coconut growing plantations were not tenements properly. Because in the 1958, we have got the tenement was actually being defined which is a very important definition, where tenement included not only the tenant cultivators of that time, but the entire settling population. The entire settling population who were actually located in the lands of the landlords were included in the tenements, which means that the settling population could include a large number of agricultural laborers, which Sri Vijayaraghavan just now mentioned. So this tenement, the definition of the tenements, unfortunately, did not include the plantation labor. It did not include also a number of coconut cultivation areas also, which meant that you have got a situation where the land reforms was actually being conducted mainly in the food crop regions or regions which paid rent, whether from coconut or other areas which paid rent in some form. So this is the first important thing which I am trying to mention here, which meant that there were areas which were outside the land reforms. That is one thing. Second thing was that, you see, in order to facilitate the land reform, You have got the Land Ceiling Act, which was actually introduced along with it. And land ceiling was again repeated in 1968, which meant that once the land ceiling was introduced, land ceiling was again applicable to similar areas where of the landlord. Again, this areas, of course, there was an attempt to include even within the Land Ceiling Act the areas which could be called plantation, particularly the areas that were part of the wastelands of the plantations as well as the coastal areas. But these areas which were considered as wastelands were eliminated later through central intervention, and this resulted in a situation where the central intervention resulted in actually giving back the wastelands which could have been allotted to the landlord, the landless population, back to the original landowner, that is basically the plantation owner or the local top owner, that is the coconut garden owner. So this was the first important thing which I am trying to mention here. Second thing is that, which is equally important, is that in Travancore and in parts of Kochi, you got a situation where the earlier land reforms had resulted, the Pandarapatam Proclamation and the Janmigadi Kudiyam Proclamation of 19th century, had resulted in a situation where a large number of government lands already had been transferred to, ownership-wise transferred to the original tenants at that time, majority of them original tenants at that time, and they had become small or medium kind of landowners by 20th century. Yes, 20th century. And this resulted in another kind of situation where, for example, the small and medium kind of landowners asserted themselves not necessarily through economic means alone, but also through non-economic kind of methods. This non-economic methods included one, familial labor, which is very often use of families. Family and inheritance was used substantially, where the division of the families into various kinds of segments was also used. Second thing is the use of caste. So caste identity became a kind of method, non-economic method by which land ownership, peasant land ownership, was sought to be maintained inside Kerala, which meant that the type of ownership that was growing inside Kerala, in fact, was based on both caste, family, as well as class. So you have got a curious situation of land ownership which resulted in caste, family, and class, and that used wage labor very often, and mostly wage labor, and only by the middle of 20th century and the end of by the early 1960s and 70s, the bonded labor, which was also associated with wage labor very often, gradually started disappearing, primarily because of the agricultural worker struggles, which Sri Vijayaraghavan was just now referring to. So this meant that you have got caste being used, family, gender being used as a form by which property relations were being established at the agrarian level, and this resulted in a situation where, for example, family as well as wage labor came into conflict very often. That is, the families that controlled a large number of areas, particularly the migrant kind of familial networks that operated in the Western Ghats regions, they came into conflict with the the agricultural labor, and we have got a curious situation where in 1970s and 80s, beginning of 80s, you have got a conflict between the Kisans as well as agricultural laborers at that time, which were the Kisans, the landowners were basically familial household kind of operatives. So this provides the basis of one of the major incidents, I think one of the major things about the later Kerala, that is the resurgence of caste and religion, primarily because resurgence of caste and religion, according to me, was a result of the operatives who are holding on to property, that is a middle-level peasantry which is holding on to property at the expense of the agricultural laborers, at the expense of the later bonded labor, etc. This resulted in a situation where caste became one of the non-economic kind of force by coercive forms by which they held on to property, which also included inheritance forms, etc. also. One would argue that this resulted in the resurgence of what we call as the casteism, at present in Kerala, as well as the assertion of what we call as Dalit and other forms of identities, because they were reacting to this kind of casteism which is being operated by the middle level peasant operatives. They were reacting to that, and that resulted in a kind of class struggle within the countryside which operated in forms in terms of caste. This is another thing which I am trying to here mention. Which means that, and third thing which I am trying to point out is that during the period after 1970s onwards, you have got a situation where this resulted in we have to think in terms of whether actually agrarian capitalism really spread the entire countryside. One would suspect that it did not. It is possible to argue in a different fashion, because you can always say that familial peasant operatives are also capitalists. It's quite possible to argue in that fashion. But at the same time, what seems to have happened is that you have got a situation where the total agrarian space did not decline, but it resulted in a major shift in the paddy cultivation areas, and the paddy cultivation areas started dwindling, and the rubber and the other forms of monocultural gardens, they started expanding. And this kind of rubber and monocultural gardens started expanding, resulted in a situation where a new middle class started developing within the countryside, which also spread into the urban areas also. This middle class, which included the middle peasant farmers, the rubber growers, the coconut growers, the various other kinds of medium level planters, that they started developing, and the rice growing paddy cultivation areas started dwindling gradually. They shifted out of paddy cultivation, moved into new middle class professions. That is, you've got a situation where most of them belong to the forward castes and they belong to the new middle class professions. So the new middle class professions resulted in a group of forward castes along with the middle level peasantry, and that resulted in new formation that developed during the period between 1980s onwards, which has got to be addressed. And this did not, that is my basic point, this is a point which I may come into a point of discussion with Professor Atreya in the morning, which I am leaving it at that, which is that this did not result in the actual growth of productivity of the soil. Because this did not result in the actual growth of productivity of the soil, primarily because of the fact that professional science and technology equipment of the people were actually given to the earlier non-productive groups. They came from the earlier landlord, middle peasant groups, which were basically from the forward caste. They sort of appropriated the professional kind of acumen, most of it. And that, there was a combination between this kind of professionalism with the new middle class, and it did not percolate down to the ordinary, what you call producing classes, the laboring classes themselves, who were mainly thrown out of, science and technology areas, engineering profession. If you look at the educational, the admissions at that time, you can see that the entire thing belonged to the forward caste, particularly the professional areas. The entire thing belonged to the forward caste and did not percolate down to the Dalits or the agricultural laborers or the Adivasi coastal laborers. None of them actually benefited out of this. Which meant that you have got differentiation between what one would call as mental labor and physical labor, because mental labor of the professionals sort of split from the physical labor of the ordinary producing classes, and this resulted in a situation the mental labor is at large, actually going outside, moving out of Kerala, trying to sell their labor to elsewhere else, etc., where the physical laborers remained here itself, who did not benefit by this thing. This resulted in a kind of contradiction which I can see at present in the present kind of situation. This contradiction will have to be addressed too. That is my basic argument here. This contradiction primarily did not result because of the land reform itself, which was progressive, but the aftermath of land reforms, which could have created either a new form of an agrarian capitalism, which was possible, and since it was not there, that thing did not take place. Now I'm concluding here because he has already shown me the label. 4 minutes, okay. so I'll have 4 minutes. So I'll conclude with that 4 minutes, this is the situation which I am presenting to you. Now what exactly? So there could be, I'm just looking at the type of alternatives that are possible. We are living into, as it has been pointed out, we are living into a situation where, for example, part of our labor actually either selling themselves openly to the global labor market or actually are migrating there. That is a fact. Kerala, part of the labor is actually selling themselves openly or are migrating there. That is one thing. Which means that there is a kind of a relationship that has grown within the labor market with the neoliberal kind of capital structure, and therefore that thing is one thing that is sought to be facilitated by certain quarters, because you can have a situation where, for example, you address the global labor market, address them so that you get enough kind of possibilities, and instead you bring the capital possible, and there is a possibilities that the incursion of capital inside the Kerala region and the outflow of labor to other places may possibly result in a situation where, as somebody pointed out, I don't know the term is correct or not, the same, kind of remittance urbanism is the term, that's what he is using. Remittance urbanism or remittance capitalism, if you want to call it, that kind of thing will make Kerala survive. That is one possibility. I'm not saying that this possibility is not there. I'm saying that the possibility is a possibility. Second thing is that, as Sri Vijayaraghavan pointed out, this remittance capitalism is sort of inevitable in one way, because that is the only way by which we can, as a state, we can maintain oneself. But at the same time, you give relief to the people. So you compare a welfare mechanism to the producing classes, where the producing classes are able to sustain themselves, but at the same time, since you cannot oppose, you cannot eliminate remittance capitalism altogether, you come out of via media by which these two things are combined. That is second possibility. The third possibility, which personally I am a person who speak for the third possibility, is that you have to really rethink the whole process in terms of, we have, through land reforms, have achieved the liberation of the producing classes. That achieved the liberation of the producing classes means that the entire tenant cultivators have been liberated, the agricultural laborers have been provided minimum wages, and we, through the numerous governments which has been pointed out, have been able to give social security and protection to the producing classes. Now the next point is, if, for example, the producing classes will have to move forward, how will they move forward? I suggest just finally 3-4 points at the end of it. This is possible through 4-5 points which I am mentioning. I am just listing them without mentioning it in detail, which is that one is that you go into knowledge dissemination on a substantial scale to the producing classes, where the producing classes are empowered to actually to become both producers in the form of productive forces which you are talking about, as well as they are also going into managerial entrepreneurial skills are also given to them. That is one. Second thing is that this kind of knowledge dissemination also will be assisted by an ability to mobilize resources, Kerala resources, and this mobilization of resources can be done only through a kind of living environment kind of solution, geo-economic, geo-climatic solution, whereby climatic change is addressed and a new kind of environmental solution is actually worked out. That is the second thing. Third thing is what I call as an integrity geography with living local variations, where the possibilities of the entire resource regions in Kerala, including the coast and the mountains, will have to be explored into an integrative geographical form, so that every possibility is actually addressed and in favor of the producing classes. So I think I conclude there. Thank you very much.
Balasingham
offered him was a survey or interpretation of the data that is available to me, the official data. Foolishly, because of course I had no idea what the data actually said or didn't say. I was actually looking for a reason to go study it. So what you have in the form of my paper and presentation is some material which is in search of an argument. And I hope very much that with your critical feedback, I will be closer to finding an argument for some of what I'm going to introduce to you. So this is what I hope to cover in the time that I have. And here we go. Right. So what's the provocation for this piece? It's to do with this massive increase in income poverty and official poverty after following COVID, but particularly following Sri Lanka's devastating economic crisis of 2021 to 2023, peaking in 2022 in sovereign default, right? So, Sri Lanka is still officially a bankrupt country. And here you can see, and I was struck by what I heard this morning from Dr. Swaminathan. She made the point that in the period up to COVID, you see a decline or decrease in income poverty, and the story is very similar, as you can see here, right, in Sri Lanka too. So it is coming down, it is progressively, that was the trend over the last 10 or 15 years prior to 2019, a progressive it appeared to be a reduction in the number of those at or below the official poverty line, and then of course now look at the situation. So this is the figure, and what the World Bank then tells us is that there's about 10% of people just above the official poverty line. So if you add that 10% to this, you get a sense, I think, of the gravity of the crisis, the socioeconomic crisis in Sri Lanka. And here are some of the markers of that crisis, right? The rate of inflation, please note food inflation, devaluation of the rupee, and imagine an economy that contracts by almost 10% in the course of really a matter of months. And a situation in which, as you can see, it's going to take, according to the bank, the World Bank, 10 years from now to get back to a situation we were in 2019. So all that progress so quickly, so easily wiped out, eliminated. So once again, I think showing us really how ephemeral, how perhaps meaningless sometimes some of these statistics and measures are, because it's possible so quickly for us to see massive reversals and changes there. Right. So I had to, of course, have a frame, and so the frame I chose was to draw on a paper by John Harris, and I borrowed from it for the first part of the title of my paper, which is in the Google Drive, and that is he points out, of course, that what statistics give us a sense of is effects but not causes, effects but not causes, and very importantly drawing our attention to how statistical measures construct and depoliticize poverty through the way in which what they tell us. So here you have just two extracts from his larger argument. Causes and effects are muddled up. Poverty is attributed to individuals or households. So in other words, it's not seen as a problem of society and structure and trends and processes, but rather individuals. So individuals, individuals who are lazy, who lack a work ethic, who are fatalistic, who don't have drive, and so on and so forth. So here you have it. And we have a methodological problem. I mean, these are conceptual problems. We have a methodological problem, which is that the data that I'm presenting to you is data from 2019. So so I was very envious when Dr. Swaminathan said that here in India she shared with us the household survey data from 22-23, I think it was, and it was available, I think, within a year or perhaps 15 months. So here 2019 data, Dr. Swaminathan, I'm sharing with you in 2025. That 2019 data only became available to us in 2022, and here we are in 2025, and I have no data to share with you about a country that has been through COVID, an economic crisis, and of course, let's not forget, an ongoing IMF structural adjustment program. I have no current data. I mean, the World Bank figure that I showed you is the World Bank's computation, and unfortunately the World Bank didn't tell me how it made that calculation. I mean, clearly it had access to data which mortals don't. So here's a picture. It's just illustrative. It's just illustrative, of course it's from 2019. But see, what I thought might interest you here is here you go along, and then right at the end you see something called estate. And that must be rather puzzling, right, to all of you here in India. I mean, why? What's this category? This is an official census category, right? It's been so for a century or more. So by estate, of course, what we're referring to is the population, the resident population in our plantation sector. And probably, I suppose, the fact that we have this separate census category is not to do with official concern for the people who live on the plantations, but rather because of the weight of the plantation, the importance of the plantation economy in the larger economy of Sri Lanka. Remember, until the end of the 1970s, Sri Lanka's export revenues basically came from tree crops. It came from tea, rubber, and coconut. That's until the end of the 1970s. That's what we exported. That's where our revenue came from. So here you have this, and then of course you can see that were you in fact to merge rural and estate together, of course these levels of poverty would shoot up. I mean, you can just see the disparity. The disparity. Estates, of course, in rural areas, but you can see the disparity between even those who live on estates and those who live in the villages nearby. But I also retain this because in Sri Lanka we have a kind of a sort of a conceptual issue or problem in the way in which we speak about the rural or agriculture. So, for example, any discussions about the rural already assume you are not talking about the plantation economy, and importantly, the people who live on those plantations, those people being members of a ethno-linguistic minority who now refer to themselves as Malay Tamils, Tamils of the hill country, Tamils of the mountains, who remember are the descendants of those brought during British colonialism in the 19th century from the drought and famine struck regions of the Madras Presidency. So in Sri Lanka, when one speaks of agriculture, usually nobody speaks about plantations. By agriculture they mean rural, by rural they mean paddy. And who does paddy farming? Usually they think of it as the Sinhala, of course, male farmer. Tamils do paddy farming. Muslims, who are an ethnic category in Sri Lanka, not just a religious category, they are also Muslim farmers, but generally when people speak of that they are thinking of a particular ethno-linguistic also group. Okay, so here just very quickly, because statistics tell us so little, I just wanted to alert you to some of this earlier literature which roots poverty in an agrarian and rural crisis. Now this trend of thought doesn't exist any longer. You don't see studies now which discuss poverty in relation to an agrarian crisis. And that's to do with basically the disappearance of agrarian political economy as a field of research or study in Sri Lanka. So here you can see trends or features that will be very familiar to you, right? Declining incomes from paddy production, weak diversification, and then the issue of what do you do if you can't make a decent income from farming, or particularly paddy farming. What are your alternatives? So what Dunham and Edwards concluded, of course, was that there's a correlation between these three trends or processes with, of course, poverty. And then you can see, and again this won't come as a surprise to anybody in this room, yes, poverty levels did fall in that period leading up to COVID, the pandemic, but income inequality widened. And here you can see the disparity between the period before economic liberalization, before what is called the open economy in the late 1970s, in 1973. So you see that trend moving towards greater egalitarianism, and then you can see the swing, the pendulum swing back in the current situation. Okay. So all I'm trying to do is to give you a snapshot, and so here it is. Still 1 in 4 in the labor force is in agriculture, but as is always pointed out by mainstream economists, what a waste, what an enormous waste. Look at all these people, there's so many of them, they're living in these rural areas, they claim to be doing agriculture, but look at their measly contribution to gross domestic product, which is the god we worship, and here it is, 7.5%. So you can see this decline. Of course, it's to do with the expansion of other sectors, manufacturing, very important now for us, garment exports. Let's see, of course, post-Trump tariffs, what that means for us, but also, of course, the service sector. And then again, no surprises to you, there is a trend of de-agrarianization. So you can see how few in agricultural households list agriculture as being their main activity and source of income. And you can see how much of rural household income now is coming from non-farm sources. So as a result of the crisis, what we know is that there has been a fall in real wages, and the situation is particularly bad in the plantation sector economy. Okay, so these are again old figures from 2019, but I think all I'm trying to do with the figures is to be illustrative. And although the figures would have changed, really the relationship or the proportion among these three sectors hasn't, right? So that basically this would continue to be the hierarchy in which income is distributed in society. Of course, in Sri Lanka, there were improvements in rural living standards. That's reflected in the better indicators that we have when it comes to housing. When it comes to electrification, Sri Lanka, it's almost universal electrification now, in the high 90s, and better, not still perfect, but better access to potable water. But where the problem is particularly intense, or where it's particularly marked, remains in the estate sector. So by the estate sector, I'm referring to plantations which are larger than 50 acres, which have more than 10 resident workers. And these plantations are divided into two. You have largely plantations which are privately managed. All plantations now are nominally state-owned, public-owned, but privately managed. And then you have a small state-managed plantation sector too. So in the plantation sector, that's where you have the worst human development indicators. That's where you continue to have the lowest life expectancy rates, the highest rates when it comes to illiteracy, the awful housing, awful sanitation conditions, of course, because the employers refuse to upgrade it. So And here's the situation when it comes to food and nutrition. So this is why I said that it's a devastating crisis. We continue to live with the crisis. You can visit Colombo and outwardly things will look quite normal to you, but one needs to go to certain neighborhoods in Colombo and a little bit outside of Colombo and to different parts of the island to see how badly individuals and communities still continue to be affected by the crisis itself when it comes to food intake, nutritional intake. So you can see the figures at the peak in 2022, food insecurity that has eased. You can see the figures look better now, but where the situation continues to be very serious or severe is in the area of child malnutrition. Okay, when I was looking at the literature, something that struck me was that whenever I saw references to rural poverty, it always made the connection with land. It seemed as if land reform would be the sort of silver bullet to deal with the issue of rural poverty. So so of course I plead ignorance because I am ignorant, but what I wanted in some ways to do was to sort of show you the picture in Sri Lanka, where the issue of land concentration does not, to my untutored eyes, is not as serious or as extreme as it is in, say, Pakistan, India, and so on. So you have, it's very uncommon to have people with you can see more than 7 and up to 20 acres, and because of land reform legislation, there's a ceiling on what you can officially own when it comes to paddy land, also coconut land, and tea land as individuals. So the picture I wanted to present to you was one in which you have a large number of land holdings decreasing in size over time, but because of restrictions in terms of because these are farmers or cultivators who are on state permit land. So you don't have very much by way of private land, it's state permit land. So it's not land that they can alienate. They can only pass it down from generation to generation. So what you're not seeing yet, although this is what of course the World Bank has been pushing for, is to have land titling, is to create a land market, and of course to basically speeden the exit of inefficient marginal and small farmers off the land into the cities and towns where they're supposed to, be entrepreneurs, self-employed, look after themselves. So indebtedness is the last thing key thing I wanted to make mention of, and that is again to draw your attention to this spike in indebtedness and how it particularly affects women. And in Sri Lanka we have an enormous problem with predatory microfinance. We have in fact, the Sri Lankan owned company, which is engaged in, which has become a transnational microfinance purveyor in Cambodia, in East Africa, and in so on. So this is just to give you that picture. And then I just wanted to end it with as I said, some of these missing pieces. How do we make sense of what happens in agrarian communities outside of understanding what is happening elsewhere? And here I just wanted to give you some, not all of those pieces, and particularly draw your attention to the importance of remittances. So this is where here, and not for the first time in Sri Lanka, we have an immediate identification with Kerala. Remittances, tourism receipts, as well as remittances from the Gulf being very, very important, our major source of foreign exchange. And then you can see these other sources of non-farm, off-farm income into rural areas from garments and from the military, from military fiscalism. So I'm going to end there, but the paper is online. Thank you so much for your patience.
We invite the last speaker of the day, R. Vijay and Nisha Patel. I I guess Sri Vijay will be making the presentation, and I gave you the revised title of the paper, which you can give. Thank you.
Liberties, we were asked to write on a particular topic. We took the liberty and said, no, we would like to change it. So we completely changed the topic from poor to investments and classes. So complete shift that we did. So the organizers accepted it, so we are very happy with it. Second is, that's one part. So let me just tell you what need the, right? I mean, reforms and its impact. And I said, I do something completely different. I'm doing something on investment behaviors. So I thought the only connecting point, if there exists anything, is saying that if investments are done, land reforms is one particular process in which you give property rights to the cultivators, which can generate investments into the system. So I thought, as a method, just try to relate it like this. But let me present what is my puzzle and what is it that I'm constructing. I had this puzzle with some of our students when we were working with it. Everyone kept on telling us, saying that agriculture is in distress. So we said, yeah, it's in a distress. Any income you look at it, there's a fall in income. But simultaneously, is there any investment taking place into agriculture was our particular question. Is there investment? Are people investing? If they're there, who is investing? It looks to be an interesting story that one needs to tell. So we thought, let me look at investment behavior to try to see if one can explain it. My part of the story that we are trying to present in the paper is in the post-2000 period. In 2000 period, we are trying to relate two parts of it. There are some micro processes that are happening in the Indian economy. We are trying to relate that to the investment behavior. So what we are saying, there are particular type of, we've thought of two micro processes that we thought about. One is tenancy that we were talking about. I'll tell you a little more on that. And the second one is diversification of households that is taking place. Households are diversifying from agriculture to non-agriculture. I thought maybe one could connect these two. That's the, how do I put it? Doesn't go ahead. This one. Right. So when one looking at agriculture, the part that generally we talk about is the significant presence of small farmers and the large number of people dependent on agriculture. Post 2000, I think that there is an interesting shift that has taken place in Indian agriculture. One is what we are saying, that increase in tenancy taking place. Right? I'll tell you, give some more information. Second is this diversification of households. That also I'll maybe present it little more details as we go there. So we are trying to see that if these are interesting changes taking place within the structure of agriculture, would the performance of agriculture captured in terms of investment, is there going to be a change? So we are trying to find this particular link if it's possible. Right. So if I look at it, tenancy, I think there's another paper that we are presenting maybe in the next session where we are presenting, but I'll tell you what I think on tenancy. We are say, when I was looking at tenancy debates around 2000, everyone said tenancy is going to die down. It's over, there's nothing there, cultivators are taking over. From 2003, when you look at the data, NSS rounds, village studies, there is a significant increase in the land under tenancy. Right? It increases from 9% to 17%, a significant increase, and the diversification is quite large. Andhra Pradesh, if you look at it, is pure tenants are increasing. 70% of the land is under tenancy. Punjab has a different, large landowners are picking up. So you have tenancy picking up, but it's not a homogeneous category. The different types of tenancies that are coming up is what is one part of it. So we define something called a pure tenants as households who own land but do not cultivate. Right? And then we have specific features, we are not going for that. But this is one part. The next paper that we're presenting comes with this. The second thing that tenant household by, this is just to give you, we classified households into owner cultivators, pure tenants and mixed tenants. Owner cultivators they don't take land on tenancy. Your pure tenants who are ones who are landless who are taking it, and then your mixed tenants. If you look at it, marginal farmers are predominantly pure tenants. Whereas you go down the lane, you get the mixed tenants. If you look at state-wise, Andhra Pradesh would land up here, Punjab would land up here. So that's one part of that was there in terms of tendency. Right? Second is the idea of a diversified household. From morning, everyone is talking about migrations and moving out from agriculture. What we try to do in multiple studies, I think first time we did it with Chitra and myself in 2008, a paper. What we took the NSS rounds. I think that this time when we did it with assets and liabilities. We took as household characteristics. From the household characteristics, we said primary occupation of all the members of the household we tried to find out. Now, if all members of the household say agriculture is their main occupation, we define them as pure cultivators. Now, the second one is all members of the household, it could be primary or secondary, are in the non-farm sector. We define that as a completely non-farm household. In between is the group that we talked about, is something called diversified household. At least one member is in agriculture, the others are not in agriculture. That's the type of classification we try to do it. This paper I think we did on assets and liabilities. What we found is the farm sector was 62, it fell down to 57 in this period. There's a decline in farm sector. Mixed household to a large extent were there. So that's a small increase taking place. Right? That was with respect to this. So somewhere we get an idea that households that predominantly dependent on farm sector are declining. Right? There was also with Nelson also does, I think he also has a paper which also presents a similar part of it. He is also here. He also finds out saying farm sector households are reducing. I think diversified households are increasing. I think Nelson also has similar type of tendency. So this goes on. Then you had Abraham coming in 2004. I'm presenting that paper because it's a very odd paper for me. What he says is that until he has two periods, until 18 he is looking at it. When he looks at it until 2018, from 2000 to 2018, he says farm sector is reducing and diversified is increasing. Non-farm is relatively constant, depends on lots of things, but it comes up as mixed or diversified. We call them diversified, he's calling them mixed. Mixed means one person in agriculture at least is there and non-agriculture. So mixed households are the ones. So everyone is trying to put up an idea saying that somewhere households from farm sector are moving to diversified households. Non-farm sector to a large extent looks to be relatively stable numbers. Right? But what he says in this particular paper after 2008, suddenly he says farm sector households have witnessed a significant increase. I'm moving around. I do hope I'm audible to everyone. Right? So he says after 2004, suddenly he says there's an increase in the farm sector households when he was class, and he says something is odd. How is it that again you have diversified declining, farm sector is increasing? So we said that is that something very odd in the result? Is it just because of a particular round that a result is there? Then you had another study by Goel, I think that was an EPW article, which again makes an interesting part, which says that after 2004, the number of people in agriculture is increasing. So there is some things happening between this period, by the time 2004 comes in, where suddenly people are coming back into agriculture. They can hear me, so I'll leave it. They can't. So somewhere this is happening is what we are trying to put up. I'm not going to this part of the story, I'll work much more on this. My part, which I haven't been able to answer as yet, is that issue saying that if there is a movement from household from farm to the non-farm, what is the causal mechanism that exists? Is it higher productivity, higher wages? From morning I keep hearing it's not either productivity or wages. It's basically some amount of movement from here to here. So if you look at it, if you say they are moving out, you have to give an explanation of the moving out. Is it because traditional Lewisian model, higher productivity, higher wages, I'll start moving out? This does not look to be happening. So it's an interesting part. Last part of my lecture, I'll see if I can speculate on that. I don't have an explanation. So this is what is coming out. So, right? So if you look at diversified, are they concentrated in a particular group? So I come back with an idea saying cultivators are there, diversified is, it's a bimodal distribution, 23% here, 20% here. So the top and the bottom look to be diversifying. So in a sense, if I look at it, the literature, the non-farm sector looks to be, the informal sector looks to be a bimodal type. Dual economy is what one talks about. Maybe that part is that, I'm not going into it, but that looks to be an interesting part of the story. Right? So I'm looking at if these two are important changes taking place in agriculture, right? On the one side, tenancy, as tenancy also have a problem which needs an explanation of why does tenancy increase, right? As he was, Professor Vijayaraghavan was saying, porous. Is it porous because the labor market is not clearing and so people start moving between these particular sectors, right? I will not go into it. So we are looking into investment into agriculture. Now who is, if these are the groups and there, what happens to the investment behavior? We look at farm business and machinery. I'll come back to, right? There are three stakeholders when you're looking at investments, right? You have private investments, you have public and corporate. Private investments, 2/3 of the investment into in agriculture are private sector, right? These two are not so important. So I said, let us try to look at what is happening to the private investment. Where are they doing? What is happening? So that's the area that we are working with, right? This time not invested in land. So land is one part of it where 4% of people are doing it. Farm business, 60% of households are investing in farm business. And then you have non-farm business, which is again very, very small. Right? If you take the farm business, it is land and land, agricultural land is 4.4% of the people are investing on that. It could be purchases of land for agricultural operation. Livestock 7.9 and you have machinery which is 96%. Now machinery is an odd situation, so we broke up the machinery into traditional and modern. Right? So traditional are sickles and all the small things which any laborer needs. Everyone has to have it. So that's investment. So every farmer does it. So it's something like an asset. Machinery is 16%. That's something which we found interesting. 16% of the investment is on modern machineries. So we started saying what is going to happen, right? Right? If you look at it, residential land building, 4% are doing it. 38,000 is the average expenditure on that. Whereas if you come to machinery, farm business is 8, this is 13. So one level, land continues to be an important asset for ownership, and you can buy land only if you have large amount of money. So the larger chaps are the ones who are going and picking up land. The others, you need some farm business, so you're coming into this. You have non-farm business is there, 13,000. So it's in between that the numbers start playing. Right? So if you're looking at agricultural investment, right? So it is land, livestock, agriculture, machine, 96%. So this shows the land for purchase of land is 55,000. So the entry barriers exist in the market. The market will not allow you to buy it. So only very small number of people are buying it. Major part goes into 3,000 is the money for machineries on the average. Right? If I in this way, I think I didn't get the table. In the 3,000, if I break them into modern and traditional machineries is 500, 5,000 the average expenses, whereas the modern goes to a little larger amount. So that's the part of it. Then we looked at profiles of agriculture investments. Right? So I cultivated and diversified households and said how is the investment taking place. I'll go a little fast. So number of households are 78 and 15%. So 78% are investing. My part, which is investing in machinery, cultivators are also investing, diversified households are also investing. Both of them are investing 60 and 57. But the average expenditure of cultivators is 8,000, which is less than the investment done by diversified households. So first time we are finding that maybe diversified households are starting to invest more into agriculture. The numbers are the same, right? On machinery also, if you look at cultivators invest more in machineries, whereas diversified house is not doing so much. So there are farm business investment is there, but machinery cultivators are doing it. I'll come back to what I mean by family size was something which was very interesting for me, which I might pick it up, which says that diversified households have a larger family size compared to what is called the cultivators, which is an interesting thing which I might pick it up when I'm presenting last. Right? So for owner cultivators, pure tenants and mixed tenants. Logically, pure tenants are the ones which do low investments. Mixed tenants are the ones which are doing much higher levels of investment compared to even owner cultivators. Maybe it's Punjab story which is pushing up the averages high. Right? So that is what one is getting at. Right? These are summary statistics that I did. We did some econometric analysis. I will determinants of this. I will present to you this part of it, but I'll tell a story which is independent of this. What we found is farm investment and agriculture machinery. As land size increases, investment increases, which I think is a very logical part. Only part which was interesting is that it increases as a decreasing rate. It falls down. So larger farmers are not investing more. They're withdrawing. Could be because they already own the instrument. You need not buy more and more instruments. That's one part of it. Per capita income. Pure tenants, if I look them as a base years, they have a different level of investment compared to cultivators. So pure tenants are investing low, which is expected. Mixed tenants are investing a little high. Right? And if you have diversified households are doing. So that's a part of it. Family size has a significant story that comes up. Because I'm finishing my time, let me just tell this a story out of it then. Right? I'm trying to put up saying that diversified households are the ones who are investing more than cultivators. They are investing more than cultivators in farm business, but not in machineries. So if I'm diversifying my household, I'm investing more in farm business, which implies maybe livestock or land, but not on machinery. Right? That's when I get into that part of it. The second is pure tenant households are investing low in both farm business as well as in agriculture machinery. Both of them, they're investing less. The third part is mixed tenants invest more or less in farm investment and significant machinery. So mixed tenants are moving towards some investment to machinery. Right? So my part of a speculative part in the last part of it is that the evolving structure of system, the way I look at it, is that maybe family size is one of the principal variables which is explaining what is happening in the rural system. If my family size is large, what do? I diversify into non-farm also. Once I do that, I diversify, but when I diversify, I think, just I diversify into non-farm, right? So I have a diversified household, my farm size increases, I diversify. Once I diversify, I don't want to invest into productivity enhancing change. I will try to see, can I get a livestock, something else, a livestock or something if I can do, I can reduce my risk in my production system. That's what the farm households are doing. And so you generate what is called a labor market which is not self-correcting, doesn't solve problems, inducing large farmers moving out into this. If I have the pure tenants also, it's non-labor market that pushes them into it. And the system now becomes, everyone talked of diversification. If you diversification, it does not increase agriculture productivity. It only increases methods of risk sharing in the system. It might have a growth reducing effect, which needs to be captured is what I'm trying to put up. I'll stop it here. Any questions? I will take it up. Thank you for patience here.
Mainly centered around reforms and the unequal sharing of benefits. The major achievements in rare cases, as we were told about Kerala, the implications of these reforms, these interventions for employment, income, wages. And again, we have the experience from Sri Lanka, we have got the experience from other Indian states, the overall Indian context. The importance, probably the rising importance of non-farm sectors for employment generation. That's the main theme which Vijay discussed just now, and how diversification is affecting the lives of people, and the importance of investment. Again, the theme which all of them discussed, the rising importance of capitalism in agriculture and the way it is affecting employment of people and what could be done. What are the ways forward? That came up for extensive discussion, promoting mobility, secure incomes, and the strategies for moving ahead. And these are things which we left behind: the reforms, the interventions, the safeguards created, the legislations, the employment creation programs. All these have had cumulative impact on the incomes of people in different regions differently. Historical setting, they have had sequential changes coming in Kerala, have had important impact on whatever happened here, what took place here. That sets out Kerala as a special case. Is that, to me, it conforms to a very known historical pattern. The kind of tenurial changes which took place in Kerala in the 19th and 20th centuries that led to the rise of commercial agriculture, plantations, paddy field agriculture in commercial terms, all those things led to large scale displacement of labor, but at times improvement in incomes. But overall, in the long run, the decline of commodity prices cumulatively affecting income levels, that finally brings us to the case for interventions of the state to safeguard the income and secure living of people, and what could be done towards these objectives. Let me invite whoever has to make a point, please feel free to come up. Insofar as possible, we'll give an opportunity to the presenters, paper presenters, to respond to your queries. Otherwise, please raise the issue, mention the paper, and let's try to move on to the next question, which they are there. Thank you. Madhura, please.
One of the things about India is that during the COVID, it was quite a remarkable achievement that we didn't have mass starvation. That food security was somehow maintained, and that is because we had a universal or near universal public distribution system, which could then be used by many state governments like Kerala, Tamil Nadu to begin with, and then by the central government to at least ensure basic minimum cereals, oil seeds, pulses, etc. So what was the, and even the IMF has said that if it hadn't been for the PDS, poverty would have been 30 to 40% higher during COVID, would have increased 30 to 40%. So what was the Sri Lanka experience, the crisis of post-COVID, but during COVID, especially because I think the food security indicators were very impressive. And the other, I think, comment on Professor Vijay and the many papers coming out of your group is, I think it's just a comment that because from our village studies and examination of secondary data, etc., I think the question as to why people are moving out of agriculture into non-agriculture is the decline in labor absorption. There are those days of employment available. So I think it's kind of a distress movement. And I think I want to just comment on a paper in the morning, since we didn't get to have, is that, which was presented by Avinash and Arjun Jain, that non-agricultural wage, although low, because it's also often in an urban area, urban costs of living are higher, is still higher than the agricultural wage. So if somebody has 30 days here and 30 days, when you total it up, there is an increase. This rural proletariat, which is a manual worker class, as Sri Vijayaraghavan also said, now no longer only agricultural class, and there is higher income levels, though of course the question is, how precarious is that, and how is there any social security with that? So, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Madhura. Your question. Yes, ma'am. Please mention your name.
My question is Vijayaraghavan.
Sorry,
My name is Ranjini Basu.
Nandini.
Yeah. So my question is that given what we have been hearing is the days of employment in agriculture declining. So agriculture labor per se, the character has changed that you mentioned, of manual labor, right? So then what is the question for a agriculture labor organization to be calling, the demands, then the frontal, the front at which the mobilization has to happen is not on agriculture production per se. Then it has to move on to other, non-agriculture aspects, and does that change the character of the organization itself? Is my question.
Sorry.
There were several references to land reforms in Kerala, and that it being the only state. But I think in future research, of course not now as an answer, is that very similar movements and land reforms took place in Kashmir, not so much in Jammu as in the Kashmir region. So very similar in fact to the Mopla situation in Kerala. So I think this whole issue of tenancy, land reforms, religion, that was a very important fundamental in the Kashmir issue, because Sheikh Abdullah was basically a peasant leader. So I think that, these two states are very fascinating for comparing.
That wasn't.
I think there's a section again on Kashmir at a later stage.
Ritu, if you are referring to the 1950s when Sheikh Abdullah was in power, am I right?
Yeah,
No.
but the changes which came on was huge. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Samshir. My question is also to Comrade Vijayaraghavan, and I will consider it as an add-on to what Ranjini asked you. Looking at what you said, most of the demands or the issues that you have highlighted, housing, house sites, pensions, MGNREGA, migration, comprehensive legislative package, etc., all are directed at the state or government, demands. What do you see as a change as an organizer of the rural working class, sections, that role of the rich landlord or upper peasantry classes that some of us have been talking about through village studies? How do you see if there is a change in the contradictions or the fights that have to be, or the struggles that have to be led, are directed towards that class in the village, or is it more now shift towards the state? So, if you can.
Questions: is agriculture a sustainable source of income for the rural in the rural sector, for the rural workers? And I think, let me invite Sri Vijayaraghavan to give a reply, representing many others who raised the same question. And later, I doubt very much if we have time, we will give others to answer the question. Okay?
As far as these agriculture workers are concerned, their primary issue is related on wage. That is the number one issue, the source of income, wage. So the wage hike is the main issue, and it is insufficient. And so many papers which have been presented here, we have seen that it is static in a way. So naturally, that will create a contradiction with the rural rich. So that issue is there: wage question, wage struggle, and wage-related problems, and the non-implementation of the minimum wage. Such issues are so. That contradiction would be there, and experience shows wherever such movements have been increased, there they are getting some positive results also. In the case of Kerala also, in the initial stage, I think in the 80s, 90s, this wage question was very much vital, and some such rural conflicts were also originated out of it, with the peasantry and the agricultural labor. That experience also was there. So this issue is pertinent to the wage. As far as these changes have been taken place, and this change of the nature of their employment, you see here the basic thing is they are originating from the agriculture labor class. That is the thing. They are agricultural labor. But because of the lack of employment in the villages and the agrarian crisis, they are forced to migrate. And agriculture failed to provide them sufficient employment. So naturally they have to go for some other work. So one rural worker nowadays engaging with agricultural work as well as the bricklaying work or some other work. Sometimes they are even migrated to the nearby town for a while and doing some work and come back. So their basic work is agriculture. They are working as an agricultural labor. So that is the experience. So that these change have to be considered. While organizing the agricultural laborers and raising their issues, we must have to understand the changes which have been occurred. So on the basis of that, we have to highlight their issues and take initiative for organizing this section. So naturally, now the organization also, now they are discussing very seriously, I know that a organization of all these rural proletariat, that is in need of the hour. That this, in the given situation, changing agrarian phenomena as well as this economic agenda and the post-independent planning of the ruling class and its impact and the crisis which it has been created naturally needs a strong organization and organizational patterns, slogans and struggles on the basis of this change. So a single organization is needed for the rural proletariat for their defense.
Paying attention to the importance of organization, organized bargaining, collective mobilization. Let me say, as it happened in Kerala, I happened to work on that subject. That set the stage for numerous institutional interventions of the government through Industrial Relations Committee, Minimum Wage Committee, a series of welfare funds, all catering to the needs of the rural poor who worked both in agriculture and in non-farm sectors. That's triggered off the kind of far-reaching institutional changes in Kerala. And that, I think, is an interesting, powerful theme for us to mull over. And let me draw this meeting to a close, and thank you very much for all those people who made interesting presentations, raised queries, and I apologize to the paper presenters for not giving them time to respond to the points raised. And let me say, for me, it was a very fascinating experience. Thank you very much.